what's happening in Texas, and a bit of a fact check for all the people who said concerns about democracy or authoritarianism in last year's campaign against Donald Trump were overblown. Quite the opposite. Indeed, you don't have to take anybody's word for it. You can see it happening out of Trump's own mouth and in the action on the ground in Texas. You can also look to the vocal backlash to what many people view as an effort out in the open, starting far earlier than some of Trump's last efforts when he was in the first term, which were closer to the election. Now, we are a long ways away from the midterms, let alone another presidential. And yet, it's happening, and earlier. And people are against it because democracy remains pretty popular. From town hall protests to Vice President Vance and Defense Secretary Hegseth, now getting an earful today in Washington. There are a range of concerns, and we can't always interpret boos exactly by their intent, but democracy is one of the big issues. Texas Democrats are also trying to stand up against something that most modern Republicans would have criticized any time before the MAGA era, and that they certainly still are suing to stop when it happens to them in California. But this is what Republicans are doing. A blatant power grab in an off-year, unusual time to carry out what Trump demanded, to change the rules in the middle of the game to try to get more seats because they are worried about losing a free and fair election in these upcoming midterms. So California Democrats are saying it's time or past time to fight fire with fire. If Republicans are able to strong-arm these tactics in Texas, California Dems, led by Governor Newsom, say they will cancel it right out using their powers in real time. No more long-winded speeches about precedent and declining republic. They are going to do what they say they need to do to blunt what looks like a very abusive, precedent-breaking effort to redraw and kind of basically steal some of these districts in Texas. So that's one way to go at this. Trump, meanwhile, has been very blunt. He thinks that what he's doing is working. He's been censoring and attacking free speech. He's been threatening. We know all that. He's got a Justice Department that's going after some of his political opponents. And he's made false claims that are blatant. He's going after mail-in voting. And then he's been doing an old Trump style of laundering and raising things and then saying, oh, he's only joking. Russia, if you're listening. And then his aides say it was a joke. That was the very first campaign. We're way past all of that. And so joking, or maybe not, about canceling elections in wartime as he meets with a wartime leader, or toying with the idea of an illegal, unconstitutional third term, something that the Supreme Court and courts have never allowed, so he wouldn't even usually be able to get on the ballot. And yet, amidst these other campaigns I'm telling you about, he continues to muse about doing something that is flatly banned under our Constitution.
You know, Vladimir Putin said something, one of the most interesting things. He said your election was rigged because you have mail-in voting. So you mean if we happen to be in a war with somebody, no more elections? Oh, it's good. I wonder what the fake
news is. You like this idea?
Yeah.
No.
Speaking of, we got a long time to go. We have a long time. You know, we have almost 4 years to go, and that's a long time. But despite that, so many people are saying you've got to run again.
Who's saying that? Why is he doing that? Is it to move the goalposts and then act like it's a compromise if he doesn't run for a third term and make other ongoing efforts to kneecap democracy look somehow smaller, kind of an expanding of the authoritarian Overton window, as some of the political scientists say? Or is he just getting ready to try to see if he can break the whole thing and run for a third term, turn this country into a dictatorship? And you say, oh, wait a minute, that sounds extreme. It is extreme. But don't let them trick you into word games and rhetoric or trying to shoot the messenger or go after the media, which we've seen in many countries and we see right now in this one. Because what we're talking about is what Donald Trump says and does. We're not talking about, it doesn't even always matter how I describe it to you, as long as you can get the facts and evidence and make sure you're getting reliable information, which is what we do around here, what we practice. So Forget the word dictator or the word authoritarian for a moment if you want to, and remember that Donald Trump did not leave office peacefully last time. That is the great stain on him, regardless of anything else you like or dislike about him. And we've reported before, there are things that he says and does that many people in the country like. That's fine. He won more votes in the last election. That's fine. But he also trafficked in, supported, and then pardoned people convicted of the crimes against the United States, attacking police, sedition, pardoning every last Jan 6 attacker.
The plan was simply this. We had over 100 congressmen and senators on Capitol Hill ready to implement the sweep.
Do you realize you are describing a coup?
No.
If you committed violence on that day, obviously you shouldn't be pardoned.
J.D. Vance, welcome to your new life. Yesterday, Donald Trump commuted the sentences of and pardoned everyone, from the most violent criminals who participated in the insurrection to those convicted of lesser offenses.
There has been no greater embrace in the modern era of people who attacked police and tried to overthrow democracy than those pardons. Pardons so extreme that now they've happened and people got used to it. That's part of being alive. People can get used to a lot of things. But so extreme that J.D. Vance, then Vice President-elect, was saying in public, well, obviously, not all of the people who attacked. Yes, all of them. And that is the context for other things Donald Trump is doing that are not technically currently illegal. For example, the show of force in Washington is still within the legal limit of basically a month limit on that. I'm not going to get into all the details, so I'm not telling you it's technically illegal right now, although he's been testing it in California and there, and he may try to blow past that deadline. But the wider impact is a federal government using a show of force, pushing others to the side, using ICE raids not only to do immigration enforcement, which again is part of their work, but showing up at opposition party members' press conferences, sometimes getting involved in arresting them. Some of those cases dropped, others continue. The show of force is linked to the attacks on democracy. And now Republican governors say they want in. Remember, there's not a bunch of riots right now in the country. This is not historically a time where you'd have National Guard troops. And while the numbers you see are relatively small, we're showing you Republicans doing this again as kind of a little step, because who really wants to debate 135 personnel? The point is to get it started, just as Trump started in California and D.C., and now we're seeing Republican governors test this. If you don't think that this is a risk for being abused around election time, you haven't been paying attention. Meanwhile, the people being patrolled are concerned. From the nation's capital to California to Texas, this is what it looks like when the attacks on democracy get more physical into the streets, encroaching while legislatures try to redraw the maps to prevent what? A free and fair midterm election that might dislodge one aspect of a Republican agenda right now, that from Trump to the anti-health care bill that came out of Washington to the ongoing secrecy over Epstein, an agenda that remains very unpopular around the nation.
It's all just stress testing, right? And it leaks out not just from this White House, but at the state level. So from the White House, you have sending in military troops into Los Angeles, waiting to see what courts say, because if the courts say that's allowed, they will continue to do that in other cities. You see them stripping funding from Washington, D.C., and then federalizing the police and seeing how long they can do it and running the possibility of extending the 30-day deadline. And then what do you see happening in Texas? Locking members of the legislature in a building or forcing them to sign permission slips. All of the authoritarian urges of this administration are leaking out. So whether it's legal or illegal, it is definitely against the spirit of democracy that everyone, except people in this White House, have lived with for our entire lives.
Molly?
I think also it's important to remember that intimidation plays a big part here. This is the District of Columbia. They feel they can do it because it's not a state technically, so it is legal. But I also think there really is, this is a city that is majority minority, 90% voted for Democrats, filled with media and a lot of Democratic politicians and a lot of judiciary. So these are groups that they really wanted to keep in line and intimidate. So I think that's a real thing, too. Also, I want to add these checkpoints that they have, where they use, it's technically legal to do checkpoints for sobriety and for car accidents, but checkpoints just because somebody is annoying you or someone doesn't look the way you want them to, that is very much out of the mainstream.
Right, and it's testing it and encroaching on it, as we've seen. Jason, the absence of bad news is not good news. But I have something that is less bad news, low bar. But we had the Democratic leader, Jeffries, on this program, and we asked him exactly about these issues. And he's doing what he can within the minority powers that he has. But he also made a point that's just a sad autocratic math. It's not good news. But here's what he said about what is in danger and what might still be protected in the coming midterms.
The good news is, to the extent that there's a silver lining in our electoral system, is that we don't have a national election system. It's state by state by state. And in many of the states where there will be competitive gubernatorial elections, and certainly in the overwhelming majority of the states where the House will be decided, there are Democratic governors, Democratic attorney generals, and Democratic secretaries of state.
I believe it will, too, Ari. I just don't know how reliable it'll be. I think sometimes we have to step back from the sort of red state, blue state thing and recognize that there are large numbers of Republicans in blue states and large numbers of Democrats in red states. And so the issue is, will a fair election be allowed